Hello, everyone. Okay, so as you can tell by that, this is going to be a little bit more of a serious video. I tried to maybe write down a script, but it ended up being very all over the place, so we're going to be more off the cuff. I do have some notes, but there has been something that's been on my heart lately, and I feel like if I don't share it, it's just going to keep eating away at me because I want someone else out there to know about this and maybe tell me if they've been experiencing the same thing or noticing the same thing. So I noticed a trend that's been happening for the past year, maybe two, and I really feel like it's become more socially acceptable again to publicly hate on kinky and polyamorous people in a way that just did not used to happen. And I've covered some of it before, like how the radfem part of Twitter found out about CNC and had a meltdown over it, or how TikTok wants to bring kink shaming back because vanilla shaming is a commensurate problem that is super duper serious and stuff like that. But it also goes deeper than that, and it's not always about topics I've covered, at least not yet. There's Libs of TikTok, which we did talk about, and there's dozens of articles coming out right now about polyamory and some also about kink, declaring it a bourgeois activity for the coastal elite, only done to achieve a false sense of community or to middle managerify, Google Docify relationships in a way that's cringe. And of course, with all these stories, it goes without saying that basically none of the journalists themselves are kinky or polyamorous, and so they're writing these think pieces basically only quoting from like one inflammatory moment as the reference point, or only referencing like one book, and they're ignoring the decades of like other books and documentaries and people that have put a lot of work in to get representation for these communities. And they're just like, no, we're gonna pretend there's only ever been one book about polyamory and nothing else. And like they're almost kind of wanting to make it seem like a bedroom activity for like bored Google employees with too much money on their hands. And I just don't know why no one is asking us about these topics. Like, there's so many people who are polyamorous and kinky, who are writers, that are authors, that are published, that are in this space. Why are you not asking them? But it's not even just journalists. It's like everyone. Like, freaking John Oliver, I think, had a joke about polyamory on his show like a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago now. But it's like everyone across the board, and it really just seems like everyone is getting a little meaner, a little more judgmental. Like, what happened to your thing's not my thing, but your thing is still okay, right? It really feels like, honestly, it only applies to furries. Like, everyone's kind of defensive of furries now, but like everything else is like, oh, that's so cringe. Like, okay, like, sorry, it's cringe to like things, I guess. And I'm planning to make a more detailed video about this in the future because, especially the polyamory, it's gotten a lot of very public, big media attention, and it seems to be something that's almost being used as a proxy issue to maybe get at, like, the queer community, the trans community, and that's something that I'm very much not okay with. And it just makes me so uncomfortable, and I really thought that kink, for some reason, might be the exception. And it's the reason why I think that is because, when 50 Shades of Grey was coming out and was very, very popular, every outlet published a piece about how 50 Shades of Grey was, yes, it was destructive and it was dangerous and it showed an abusive relationship, but it was not representative of kink as a community, and that you could do kink between consenting partners. And like, where did all of that goodwill towards kink go? It's almost like everyone either thinks that kink is like the same as 50 Shades now, or that their original defense of kink as a concept was not really so much about kink itself being something that was worthy of being defended, but because it gave them another, like, very justifiable angle to attack this popular women's erotica with. Like, it's almost like for a lot of people, the problem with 50 Shades was not really that it was actually bad kink representation, but that by calling it bad kink representation, you gave legitimacy to all of the other points about like how it's cringe and bad and awful and like how it makes you want to roll your eyes that someone, you know, a middle-aged married woman in the suburbs could fantasize about being tied up. Like, I really feel like now that is more where the world is at, is like dropping that pretense and just being like, actually, kink is garbage and it always has been, and if you do it, you suck. Like, oh, that's really, really hard to sit with. And what really kicked all this off for me was a couple people messaged me to tell me about a TikTok creator who had shared a story about growing up with a mom who had worn an eternity collar and was in a power exchange relationship. And I am going to make a video about that hopefully soon, because I think talking about boundaries with family especially is super important. But I saw her videos and it really got to me. Like, I couldn't even get to watching the videos because something in the way that people acted in the comments just felt like a knife in my chest. And I don't know why I thought people would be more complex and more thoughtful, but instead it was just like these people talking about how like folks with eternity collars are just always like that, and they always look like how you expect them to, you know, i.e. they're ugly, and how cringy and weird it is when kinky people are judgmental about promise rings. A thing I have literally never heard a kinky person ever say anywhere online. And, you know, maybe something would happen, like maybe somebody would say something like, you know, it should be okay that I have a collar because people have all these other signs of relationship commitments and no one bats an eye at that. But, you know, that's just vanilla shaming, according to TikTok, to say things like that, just like asking for a modicum of respect. And I could not take it. I don't know what it was, because they weren't even really like that mean. Like, they weren't laughing at a specific person. It gave me the feeling of walking past a lunch table and hearing everyone openly laughing about something and watching them point at something, and then realizing the thing they're laughing at is a picture of you and like a friend group with like you and all of your friends. And it's just mean, and like, what even is the purpose? Like, it's not a robust argument against wearing a collar to be like, they always look like how you expect. And by the way, a lot of that, like, they always look like how you expect type comments are like extremely queerphobic and are only ever directed at people that look visibly queer. No one's saying that about a conventionally attractive blonde woman who wears a collar, of which there are many that are very easily seen on TikTok, on Instagram, on any social media account. Like, a lot of the people that are very popular who wear collars on TikTok are like objectively extremely attractive people, but they never get comments about how, oh, you think, you know, you're hot. Well, you're not. Like, no one, unless someone's delusional or they just like hate people that have an alternative aesthetic, no one's saying that to them, because like, it's obvious that they're just hot. But for some reason, when you have like somebody that's not model worthy wearing a collar, it's like, oh, everyone who wears, like, it's the same thing I've heard about the BDSM community a lot. It's like, the BDSM community is all people who are old or fat or ugly. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that people who are older or who are fat, like, don't deserve to have fun. Like, I didn't realize that you have to be attractive to have fun with your partner. You have to be attractive to participate in something that brings you joy. Very silly. And I think part of it is like, this feels like a very juvenile response, but just off the cuff, I feel like it's very projection-y. Like, it speaks to a lot of internalized shame I think people have about themselves and their own experiences and their sexuality and their bodies, because they feel like they don't have permission to do things because of how they look or how tall they are or how much experience they have. And so in order to sort of maintain their own internally formed status quo, they have to put down other people who deviate from that, because if they don't, well, that just might mean that they're the lame ones and everyone else is out there having fun and not caring. And that is something that a lot of people cannot tolerate. And part of why this is frustrating for me is there is a lot to be said about wearing a collar and the choice to do that and the choice to get into very intense power exchange relationships. And especially in that particular story from that TikToker, maybe we could focus on, I don't know, emotional enmeshment and parentification, the lack of boundaries, and the fact that this is abuse that would never ever be sanctioned by the community at large, but, okay, because this was something that got really viral and went way outside of maybe its typical target audience, let's just blame the kink wholesale. And it's funny because in vanilla society, we never blame being vanilla for the reason why abuse happens. No one, I don't think, ever at any point in time has ever been like, well, the reason why you got abused is because you had a vanilla relationship, and if you were just kinky, that would not have happened. I mean, maybe one truly delusional person has said that thinks that oh, well, if your partner likes hitting you, just make it a kink thing so it's fun. Somebody's probably said that before, actually, now that I think about it, but that is extremely rare. No one ever goes oh, it's the monogamy, it's the vanilla relationship, that's why all these bad things happen to you. But as soon as something bad happens that's related to kink, related to polyamory, those things become the source of the problem and not much more mundane human things that cause these relationships to go wrong. It's not the polyamory that's the problem, it's there was basic human incompatibility, and they also would not have been compatible had they attempted to do monogamy. Or in the case of kink, even if that person was not in a kinky relationship, they clearly had very unhealthy boundaries with their kids, and that would, maybe the intensity of things would have been different, or maybe it would have been violating in different ways. But I think that just initially, not even necessarily talking about the specific person, but when you have a parent who does not have an appropriate sense of boundaries with the kid, it doesn't matter if they're kinky or vanilla, it's gonna come out in different ways, but the problems are still gonna be there, So I feel like it's very deeply unfair to blame kink or blame polyamory just because they're different, and then making those things the source of the problem. First of all, how do you know? Are you their therapist? Have you deeply investigated the source of these issues? What are we doing here? I see we're just wildly guessing, and everyone else is patting themselves on the back for being yeah, we figured it out. The problem was the kink. And it's was it though? I don't think so. And actually, between when I was writing down this script and when I'm filming it now, I have found yet even more examples of people implying that just being kinky makes you a danger to kids. And we're going to talk about that in a video soon, because I am writing a script for that one. I've been able to mentally process that one enough to be able to sit with it objectively. But nothing in kink says don't have boundaries with kids, or even with your kids specifically. And if you are a parent and you watch this channel, please contribute your thoughts, but I am 99% sure that all of the parents who watch my channel would agree with me, and they would happily talk at length about how they have all these precautions they take to conceal their kink relationships and even their toys from kids. I get questions about that all the time. People wanting to do right by their kids, but also still having an adult life with their partner, with their spouse. And I think that should be fine. I think it's sort of wrong to expect parents to be completely non-sexual entities because they have kids now. How do you get more siblings if you don't maintain a robust bedroom? And for a lot of people that are allosexual, having a healthy bedroom connection is really important to having a healthy relationship. So if you just tell parents, oh, well, you can't do anything sexual at all ever because, a kid might hear you and that will ruin them psychologically forever, there has to be a balancing act. And I think there are appropriate ways to handle that make it so both the adult needs are met, which makes the household dynamic overall, I think, healthier, because when the parents are in a happy, healthy, loving relationship, if that happens to include sex, great. And if that need isn't being fulfilled, that can cause so much tension and so many problems. And I think telling people they're bad parents for wanting to have a sex life and trying to find out ways to manage that are appropriate, that respect their children, Like, the solution is not just saying, oh, adults, once you have kids, no more sexuality for you. Erase it, burn your lingerie, bury everything that you possibly can, get rid of it, throw it out, you're done, fun is done. Like, again, it goes back to, like, adults can't have fun. Adults can't do fun things. Adults are supposed to be super duper serious and very straight and buttoned up. And if your kids at any age ever find out about anything, they're going to be ruined for life. And along those same lines, I've increasingly seen a lot of conflation of what is legitimately harmful with things that are probably not harmful, right? So being a teenager, like being 17, maybe 18, living at home, and being vaguely aware that your parents have a sexual relationship, kinky or otherwise, I don't think that's abusive. And like, again, I don't know, I will default to the opinions of child psychology experts on this one, but I really don't think that, like, learning in retrospect that your friend had a mom who was collared in 1995 is a crisis or necessarily should be an emotional crisis. And I am really worried that we are talking about everything being, like, super harmful and super damaging, and the thing that's really harmful is wearing a metal necklace that somebody who's a toddler has zero awareness of, and that even just wearing a piece of jewelry is abusive implicitly. But maybe that's also because there's less of a separation now between adult spaces and non-adult spaces online, and so people know way more about certain things much earlier in their lives than they would have a couple decades ago. But, like, I don't know what to do about that. Do you know what to do about that? And the weird part is that a lot of people who are making comments, like, being horrified at the idea of, like, wearing a collar after you have a kid, like, they are bi, queer, trans, whatever themselves. And it's like, do you not see what you're doing here? And it's very funny because, like, there's a pushback against kink and polyamory because it's been labeled as, like, a straight white person thing, which makes it okay to target, but it's very much not that. For some reason, that's a narrative because some of the popular media that's come out recently about polyamory and kink has been very, like, white-centric, very, like, middle-class American-centric, but that doesn't mean that the plurality of people who do those things are actually in those social groups or are in that class or are white or whatever. Like, that is just one version of it. And, like, it's so weird to me that paint those things as, like, oh, well, it's okay to make fun of this because it's, like, a straight white person thing. Like, is it though? Like, I find it very, very funny that, like, people that are queer and trans, typically very young people, are on these social media apps, like, using the exact same sort of language against kinky people that they have certainly had used against them or their friends. Like, that whole, like, they always look like how you expect, or, like, why are they trying so hard to be different? Like, where have I heard that one before? I really wonder. Like, kinky people and polyamorous people are not your enemies. They are just different. And I've seen people who, like, make these TikToks and stuff where they're like, I'm just trying to understand. I just don't really get it. But then for the next, like, 5 minutes, it's them repeatedly saying, like, that's just really weird. That seems unnecessary. I could never do that. I mean, why would you want someone to control your life like that? And it's like, are you actually understanding? Or are you just talking out loud about a thing that you don't like? And you're just saying, well, but I just don't get it. It's like, no, you don't. Not only do you not get it, you're, like, actively hostile towards the very idea of it existing. And that is something that we could all work on. I think that hostility, that meanness, that I just don't know why it's there. Like, I don't know, like, what did kinky people do to you? Like, that's my genuine question. What did kinky and polyamorous people do as a category to deserve this ire on such a large scale? Because we mostly, from what I understand, we're keeping to our dang selves, all right? We're not the ones forcing articles down everyone's throats. We're not the ones who are trying to make, viral YouTube videos of, like, oh my gosh, Folsom Street Fair. Like, the people who try to make viral content about polyamory or kink, like, they are outsiders who are trying to make money and get attention from the shock value it brings. And most kink people are just like, I just want to be able to go to my munch and like downtown St. Paul or wherever. I don't know if there's a munch there or not. And like, I just want to be left by my dang self and I want to have fun with my friends. And I do think that this is maybe part of a larger trend that's been happening. And you might have seen people on social media talking about people freaking out that like everything is becoming like prawn, right? Which it very much is not. And I feel like you can only say this if you aren't familiar with like the entire genre of erotic thrillers and the era of Skinemax and old school HBO back in the 90s and the aughts, or the noughties if you prefer. But there is still a panic happening about it. There's like been a continual panic for decades, it seems like. And I do think that conservative media has been extremely influential, and they've kind of gotten people on the same page about like all nudity and all sex on screen or like in a paper, in a book is all prawn, and it's all because people are prawn brained now. Like, yes, we are turning into crustaceans. I hate the fact that I can't say the actual word, but like YouTube is slowly becoming like every other social media platform, and I want people to hear this message, so I am censoring myself because that is one of the words that YouTube really does not like. But instead of it being seen as something that like contributes to a narrative or that like can be part of an adult relationship, and so it's going to happen sometimes in books, not just for like making it erotica, but because that's part of somebody's story. And maybe it's because book talk has kind of become like soft YA, like people, I don't know, maybe not on book talk enough to like know about this, but I feel like what I've heard about book talk is it's like horny YA novels being read by people in their like mid-20s. And so there is a sense maybe from that like, oh, people are putting that in books because, or like Colleen Hoover novels being like incredibly popular. Those are like very thinly veiled erotica novels, and maybe people are looking at that and seeing that as representing like, oh, all media that has sex in it is like these books. And it's like, no, sometimes things happen in a movie or a TV show because it's an important part of character development or a plot, and that's okay. And I'm saying all this, by the way, as an asexual person, and I don't necessarily love it when there's on-screen lovemaking, let's say, but that doesn't mean I think it's all because people have short attention spans and they have to have prawn going at all times to hold their attention. Like, no, I just think that sometimes that is part of a character's experience because it's part of a lot of people's experience. The thing that we should be having big old questions about is not like nice, fun, consensual interactions between people who like each other, but why the hell so many people who are writing scripts feel the need to jam those scripts full of non-consensual interactions. That's the question we should be having. I remember seeing something recently around this time too that said that there were like newer authors and like newer writers like have a tendency to like jam their scripts full of like unnecessary non-consensual interactions. And it's like, why do you think that R word is such an important part of like, because there's a difference between glamorizing sexual assault and like somebody having, maybe a scene where they're like losing their virginity, or they're reconnecting with a partner they haven't seen in like 2 years because they've been away or something, or maybe they're a time traveler or whatever. Like, there are times when I think it makes sense, but maybe not everyone agrees with that anymore for some reason. And with this revelation that more and more people are thinking negatively about nudity and sex on screen of all kinds, people are wondering why that is. And there's a lot of theories out there, it's like, oh, well, the internet is being sanitized, or the iPad babies are growing up and this is what that's done to their brains, or there being less and less spaces online just for adults, and so adult content is spilling out everywhere else, and so it's not as segregated as it used to be. But regardless of the reason why, I think it is undeniable that there is a sexually regressive streak that I don't think many of us would have seen coming from the demographic that it's coming from right now. Like, maybe it's because we've lost the cultural memory of the fight for gay marriage or the AIDS crisis. And we have lost those things extremely quickly, and it really shows. And for some reason, there is a demographic of queer people and trans people who think the way forward is to sanitize everything. And they think that if you talk about sex at all in like public, that's wrong, and we gotta hide it all from public. And we basically have to align with far-right conservatives on banning adult content like across the board anywhere where it could ever possibly be viewed by somebody who maybe possibly doesn't want to think about that content. As far as I know, we will not win liberation by partnering up with people who would like to throw us into a jail cell and then throw away the keys. You may be able to escape going to the jail first, but you will be sent there eventually alongside everyone else. So it really just feels like a mistake to take the conservative framing of things by default. And it really feels like there's also no curiosity for other perspectives. There's no kindness or compassion when like hearing somebody who thinks something differently. Like there's a lot of stubbornness of just like, before I enter a conversation, this is already what my point is. I'm not going to hear any other arguments to the contrary. I already know what I think, and you cannot move me. And maybe that's the whole like echo chamber thing being ramped up to maximum, but it does seem to really be affecting people and affecting our ability to have conversations about this, because it doesn't feel like a conversation anymore. Like I don't feel like I can talk to the people on TikTok who think that people who wear collars are cringe, or people who feel like all sex in movies should be erased because it's, you know, it's making people addicted to prawn or whatever. Like I don't think I can say anything or reach these people in any way that would ever get them to see my side. Like I think people have to choose for themselves to change, which is largely true in most places in life, but there's an unwillingness to even hear out an argument. Like it's just, nope, you're wrong. Boop, that's it. Turning off my brain, goodbye. And that's really frustrating. Because I know when I was growing up and I was on both social media, the internet, in real life too, I had my mind changed by things maybe that I didn't even initially have my mind open towards. But I wasn't like so repulsed by it and so turned off by it that I didn't think about it twice. Like I still let the ideas percolate through, and I was curious enough to pursue those things because I care about like having not even necessarily correct opinions, but like having opinions that align with my values, that make sense to me, that are cohesive, that are well argued, that are supported by the evidence, that are scientific. Like that's important to me more so than just like having my original point right. And maybe, I don't know, because all the people making these arguments are quite young. Maybe it's just that like age of like being overconfident, and then like maybe in 5 years they're gonna be like, oh my god, I was so silly for thinking that. Because I think a lot of people, especially when they're forming like group identity, there is a tendency to like just go over the top with defending it and not really being willing to see other people's sides. Like I think with like young people you see who are identifying more with like rad femme Twitter, you know, they're not really interested in hearing anyone else's opinions yet, because if they could be swayed by that, that might mean that the group they identify with is not really their group. And because we have such a lack of social cohesion right now, and we have so few opportunities for meaningful social connections, the idea of that connection being threatened is so scary that you can't let any ideas in, because having a group that you maybe more blindly follow than not is better than having no group at all. But I mean, I say that, and I'm thinking in this moment about how, like, I'm sure somebody could say that about me and my group identification with kink and my desire to defend the kink community against people that are maybe detractors of it. But I like to believe that my arguments are based in science and logic and, you know, supported things, and not just like, it makes me feel scared, you know? Like, feelings give good information, but they're not the complete story either. And it's not even just the lack of curiosity or the lack of openness, but it's like anything that you don't like is straight into the ew bin when you don't personally like it and it's not your thing. And people seem, in particular, very averse to cringe, because cringe is earnest, and people hate that. People hate it when people earnestly enjoy things, and people have always hated nerds, and no matter who you are, you can join in on dogpiling the nerd. And I think that's something that actually, gosh, is like an old, like, Vlogbrothers thing. I feel like this whole, like, nerds are people who are, like, enthusiastic about something or whatever. I think people are just, like, don't like that. They don't like it when you unironically wholly enjoy something. Because it's like, no, you can only like things ironically. You can't like it too much. There's, like, even if people get super involved in, like, aesthetic identification and, like, you know, having a house looks a certain way, or doing makeup a certain way, or like looking a certain way, or using whatever labels for themselves. That's very important. But like earnestly, unironically enjoying something that's maybe outside the norm or outside of acceptable levels is like beyond the pale and should not ever be done. And I think it is very rich, although I'm sure for some reason they will blame kinky people for these things happening, or like, you know, alternative people in general, they'll blame them for this happening. But in mainstream vanilla society, things are changing, right? You can buy a vibrator at Sephora. For decades, makeup companies have been naming their products things like orgasm. You know, leather and latex are both having really big fashion moments. Every alternative girl on TikTok is wearing a harness or a bondage belt or a collar with zero context. And also, permanent jewelry bracelets are popping up everywhere. I saw one at a freaking Mother's Day market earlier on in May, and like, I was shocked by that. I'm like, you can really get these things anywhere. So vanilla people are allowed to weld bracelets onto themselves, which is way more permanent than a kink collar is, by the way. But we can't wear, like, something with a magnetic closure because it might be offensive to people. They might have to look at that and think about somebody else's relationship for a brief moment, and that's extremely violating. Oh, and also the fact that everyone on Earth is apparently into choking and breath control now, but they hate the kink community, so they're not getting any information from us on, like, safer ways to do it. They're literally just winging it. And also, like, the long history of commentary YouTubers doing ads for adult companies. And I don't know, Girl Freaking Defined doing a sex course. The purity culture YouTubers, one of them is now offering a sex course. You cannot make this stuff up, but I guess, you know what? The kink community, kinky people are the problem, right? Like, the thing I wrote in my notes right now is literally just like, why don't people like us in like all caps or something? Like, I don't, like, why? Like, I mean, we're not okay with Girl Defined making a sex course, but like, why are we being treated the same as Girl Defined, like, by some people? Like, are we really that bad? What do we do? Why don't people like us? When I wrote this, I was so sad when I wrote down these notes. I felt this crushing weight of how many stories I am both seeing of dangers happening in the kink community, like more and more conservative outlets going after kinky folk. And trust me, I have some more stories we're going to talk about because it is getting worse. And also seeing people, like, just on all sides dunking on kinky people, dunking on polyamorous people. And it's like, I just don't get what we did. I just don't know what we did wrong. Like, if we did something wrong, please tell me. I want to apologize and, like, talk about it publicly and, like, try to clear the air. But, like, just feel like we're being targeted for literally no good reason, other than maybe displacement of, like, you know, other groups, like, you know, women or queer people. They feel like they're being targeted by the far right, by alpha males, by dating coaches, whatever. And so they are getting hate, and then they are putting it onto another community that is lower down than them, in order to feel like they have a sense of control and power, maybe. I don't know. I do get in this mode where I tend to try to psychoanalyze what's happening and try to be like, what is the reason for why is this happening? I don't know how useful that actually is all the time, though. I think it can be defensive because you're trying to think, oh, well, if I can understand why this is happening, I can know how to prevent it. But we don't really actually control what other people think or feel about us. And that's scary, especially when the way they feel may result in dangerous things happening for us, or people being permissive of other people doing dangerous things to us because they don't think that we deserve being protected or cared about. And that's scary. But I've been rambling for fucking 45 minutes? Oh my god. Okay, I need to be done. I gotta make dinner. I gotta take my dog outside. All right. this hopefully, I feel better. I got it off my chest. It has been a while since I've done a rambly video. I've been more using teleprompter stuff for content lately, but every once in a while it feels good to just have some notes, get it all out there, and yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed this ramble. I did a poll on Instagram on my story asking people if they've noticed like an uptick in like attacks or negativity towards kinky and polyamorous people. And the majority of people did say yes, but there was also a lot of people who said they had never even thought about it before. And that put together was probably at least like 75% of people. But I also had people, first of all, okay, maybe I should, more like last of all, I should probably tell people, it's not helpful if you comment something like, oh, this is just happening because you're in a social media bubble, or it's because you're American and everywhere else is fine, or whatever. Like, have you seen the nationalism that's currently going on in a lot of European countries? Have you seen what certain countries are doing to gay rights in a lot of places around the world? Like, this is not an isolated thing. Please do not minimize experiences by saying, well, but it's not really that bad, or it's only happening to you, or you're only noticing it because of social media bubbles. Like, no. Like, I'm sorry, it's not a social media bubble when, like, The Atlantic, The Cut, The New York Times, like, on down the list are all writing articles about the same dang thing and are saying the same or similar judgmental rhetoric about a group of people. That's not a social media bubble. That is something changing socially on a much larger scale than just TikTok or Instagram or Tumblr or wherever. But yeah, okay, that's going to be it for now, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. Again, share your thoughts in a comment down below. If you did enjoy this, please do subscribe because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of different kink and BDSM related content, sometimes rants, usually prepared educational content, reaction stuff, educational stuff, always the goal for me. And if you really enjoyed this and you want to support me, you can go over to my Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me there, thank you so, so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.